This screencast shows how easy it is to manipulate HTML elements on a page using the powerful jQuery library. I've got the Rotten Potatoes list of movies page up as usual, and the first thing I'm going to do is activate Firebug. Usually it's easier to run it in its own window, but so that we can see everything on one screen, I'm going to start it in the same window as the browser itself. Now the first thing I'm going to need to do is to reload the page so that Firebug can actually track all the JavaScript that gets loaded. And as soon as I do that, you can see in Firebug's script tab that one of the first scripts that got loaded is jQuery.js. In fact, if we go back and look at the source for our page, we can see that several scripts were loaded as a result of putting in the single JavaScript include tag in our Haml template. Application.js is the top level JavaScript that really just loads other files. Rotten Potatoes.js is where we would put our application-specific JavaScript code. jQuery and jQuery.ujs are the jQuery library itself, and Rails.js is some glue that allows Rails to more efficiently work with jQuery. Let's switch over to the console view in Firebug, which lets us interactively type JavaScript expressions. Remember that when this appears outside the scope of any function, it refers to the global object. And when JavaScript is embedded in a browser, the global object is the window representing the current browser window. We also said that the document property of window points to the root of the document object model, or DOM tree, which means that we can use some of the browser's built-in functions, like getElementById, to return the browser's representation of a particular element in that DOM tree. But it's much more powerful and flexible to use the enhanced jQuery functionality to do this instead. Remember that jQuery allows us to use either the word jQuery to call it, or the shortcut $. In either case, we can pass any CSS selector to jQuery. In this case, I just passed a selector meaning any table row, and what I got back was a collection of all the table rows. jQuery provides functions that operate on either an individual element or a group of elements. For example, calling hide will hide all of the table rows. Now, how exactly did this happen? If we take a look at the view source generated source, in other words, how the page source looks after JavaScript has had a chance to operate on it, we can scroll down to the table and see that all of the TR rows have had this inline CSS style for display none added onto them. That's why they don't appear. They're still part of the HTML, but they have been styled away by CSS. Let's show the table rows again and try something a little bit more interesting. This time, we'll assign a JavaScript variable to this element corresponding to a heading 1 whose CSS class is title. We do in fact have such an element, and notice that when I hover over the element in Firebug, the corresponding elements get highlighted in the HTML view so that you can see easily which elements you've selected. Now we can use some of jQuery's animations, like slide up, and you can see that the title disappeared. We could also slide it back down to show it. And as with certain other functions that show and hide, there's also a toggle function that changes the state from hiding to showing or vice versa. In each case, the number I'm passing here is the number of milliseconds, but the words slow and fast are also shortcuts for the speeds at which you can do some of these animation effects. Let's try something a little fancier. This time, we'll grab the th element that's inside the movies table, and we'll try a more sophisticated animation, fade to transparency. Again, the first number is the number of milliseconds, and in this case the second number is the final transparency. And you can see that it sort of slowly fades out. In fact, we can do the same trick on the collection of all the table rows. So, that's an overview of how much easier it is to do some of these visual effects, element selection, animation, and so on using the jQuery library, which also has the benefit that even though different browsers implement their JavaScript APIs slightly differently, jQuery gives you a uniform API that's reliable and very likely to work across all browser types.